Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, the IDF continues to apply vigorous pressure on a large group of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror operatives that have barricaded themselves within Shifa Hospital. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris warns of consequences in the event that Israel were to follow through on its plan to enter the Gazan border town of Rafah. The Islamist Hamas and Iranian proxy Palestinian Islamic Jihad continue to sustain consecutive defeats in the Gaza Strip, particularly in the northern part of the enclave, where the extensive IDF operation at Shifa Hospital persists.
Today is day 6 of the IDF's operation against Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Shifa Hospital. 170 terrorists were neutralized in or around the Shifa Hospital compound while firing at our forces. The IDF apprehended hundreds of terror suspects with confirmed ties to Hamas or Islamic Jihad, making this one of the most successful operations since the start of the war. A large number of these terrorists were involved in planning and executing the brutal massacre of October 7th. This operation isn't over yet. Right now, Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists are barricading themselves inside the Shifa hospital wards. Hamas is destroying the Shifa hospital. Hamas is firing from inside the Shifa emergency room and maternity ward, and throwing explosives devices from the Shifa burn ward. Terrorists hiding around the hospital are firing mortars at our forces, causing extensive damage to the hospital buildings.
While a large group of Palestinian terror operatives continues to barricade themselves within Shifa Hospital, the IDF is going beyond its responsibilities under international humanitarian law and the Geneva Convention to protect the civilian population in the terror-infested medical facility. Meanwhile, tensions between the United States and Israel over the latter's unwavering commitment to launch a military operation against Islamist Hamas in the Gazan border town of Rafah is evidently on the rise. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, in an exclusive interview with ABC News, stressed that the Biden administration views any major military operation in Rafah a huge mistake.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafah who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
Are you ruling out that there would be consequences from the United States?
I am ruling out nothing.
In response to the Vice President's drastic remarks, which evidently have no operational merit, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asserted that Israel remains determined to achieve total victory versus Hamas, which demands for a Rafah offensive.
אנחנו מציינים היום את חג הפורים. לפני למעלה מ-2000 שנה, בפרס העתיקה קם צורר אנטישמי, המן הרשע, שביקש להכחיד את היהודים מעל פני האדמה. היהודים קמו, התאחדו, נלחמו וניצחו ניצחון מוחלט. היום בפרס המודרנית קם לו צורר חדש, המשטר האיראני, שמבקש להכחיד את מדינת היהודים. אנחנו ראינו כבר מה עשה אחד השליחים של הצורר הזה. החמאס ביצע ב7 באוקטובר מה שגם הנשיא ביידן קרא הרוע המוחלט. אי אפשר לנצח את הרוע המוחלט כשמשאירים אותו על כנו ברפיח. כמו בימי קדם, כמו אחינו, גם אנחנו מתלכדים, נלחמים ומנצחים. אנחנו ניכנס לרפיח ונשיג את הניצחון המוחלט. חיסלנו את המן, נחסל גם את סינואר. חג שמח לכם.
It is important to highlight that while the Biden administration remains vocally opposed to the Rafah offensive, it has not halted its support for Israel. However, following a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other senior Israeli officials, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stressed that the Biden administration is looking forward to hosting an Israeli delegation, which is to be headed by Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi, to try and find alternative solutions that would somehow bring about the destruction of Hamas absent the use of military means.
We also talked about Rafah. We share Israel's goal of defeating Hamas, which is responsible for the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And we share the goal of ensuring Israel's long-term security. As we've said, though, a major military ground operation in Rafah is not the way to do it. It risks killing more civilians. It risks wreaking greater havoc with the provision of humanitarian assistance. It risks further isolating Israel around the world and jeopardizing its long-term security and standing. So we're looking forward to having Israeli officials in Washington next week to talk about a different way of achieving these objectives that we share, of defeating Hamas and ensuring Israel's long-term security. It really requires an integrated humanitarian, military, and political plan. As I said, we'll be talking about that next week, going through the details of what we see as the best way forward.
While the war in the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip is far from over, Secretary Blinken is seemingly working to promote a path forward for the so-called day after, seeking to secure backing for any plausible framework from Arab nations in the region.
We also had an opportunity to talk about the longer-term trajectory. What needs to happen once the conflict in Gaza is over. Conversations that I had with our Arab partners over the last couple of days and that we had here in Israel as well. We're determined that Israel succeed in making sure it can defend itself, that October 7th never happens again, that it emerge from this strong, secure, integrated in the region, with a future of security and peace, not only for Israelis, but for Palestinians and for our other friends in the region. And we believe there's a path forward to do that. We'll be continuing to work to flesh out that path and to try to walk down it in the days and weeks ahead.
Alongside frustration over Israel's intention to fulfill its commitment to destroy Hamas via military means, the U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, voiced Washington's outrage over the decision by Moscow and Beijing to veto the U.S. proposed draft resolution, calling for an immediate ceasefire in exchange for the release of all 134 hostages in Hamas captivity.
The United States put forward a resolution at the UN Security Council that supported ongoing diplomatic efforts aimed at securing an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as part of a hostage deal. Notably, the resolution condemned Hamas for the October 7th attacks, which we believe is long overdue, blaming Hamas, condemning Hamas, especially in light of the UN's recent report confirming that Hamas engaged in conflict-related sexual violence. This was a balanced, timely text, and it is in line with our long-standing calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza over a period of at least 6 weeks as part of a hostage deal. Nothing new there. The vast majority of the Council voted in favor of the resolution, some 11 other nations. Unfortunately, Russia and China vetoed it. That was hardly a surprise. They'd rather shoot down something that we authored simply because we authored it, rather than consider the strength of what it called for, with overwhelming Council support. And what did it call for? An immediate ceasefire. All hostages released, more aid getting in to the people of Gaza, and Hamas condemned for the slaughter of innocent Israelis. It's difficult to look at that text and find what's objectionable about it, except the fact that the United States is the one that authored it and put it forward.
It is important to highlight that alongside the veto, which was exercised by both Russia and China during the UN Security Council vote, Algeria also voted against the American draft resolution, which the Palestinian representative subsequently asserted constituted a collective objection by the Arab world against the United States position.
We want to say from the beginning that the ambassador of Algeria, who spoke inside the Security Council, reflects unanimously the unified Arab position vis-à-vis the draft resolution, which was not adopted in the Security Council for the obvious reasons, including it is one-sided and it did not mention Israel except maybe one time. And we reject framing what is happening as a terrorism issue.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. Separately, I'd like to encourage you as ever, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. Jonathan Hassan wishing you a Shavua Mevorach v'Chag Purim Sameach, and God willing, we'll see you during our upcoming TV7 Israel updates. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.